Oh, hello. Oh, hello. Welcome to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. I forgot to hit the go live button. So I just hit the go live button, so you missed out on all that wonderful music, and you missed out on what we do on the Wells Report, which is report the news fairly, straightforwardly. We do point out fact and bias. Pointing out bias is not an opinion. It's simply a warning. What you're about to hear is biased. Stuff like that. Then, of course, we do commentary, and commentary is not the news. Commentary is my opinion, just as valuable as yours. So, by all means, share your opinion. You can do that a couple of different ways. You can join us on the chat room, which is going on right this very second at Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. And by the way, Jesse, our dear friend Jesse Hamilton Kennedy, is the first person to get through on the chat room. So she wins the chat derby today. Okay. By the way, getting back to what we do. So it's news, analysis, commentary, and debate. And you can also call us at 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. I forgot. I was sitting here getting ready to do the show, and I forgot that today was Fishing Shirt Friday. So right before the broadcast, I rushed down to my vast, extensive walk-in closet and wardrobe and grabbed my fishing shirt. This is something we started a few weeks ago. It seems to have caught on a little bit. But I'm trying to figure out if anybody else is wearing their fishing shirt. So we've got a few people that are watching the broadcast. Are you wearing your fishing shirts? And if you are, send me a picture. Send me a picture of you wearing your fishing shirt. Okay? All right, I would appreciate that. And by the way, please, I'm sort of torn by this. On one hand, I want you to wear more than a fishing shirt, but on the other hand, when in Rome, anyway, if you are wearing, okay, so camp shirts, do camp shirts count on Fishing Shirt Friday? I don't know whether camping shirt can. You'll have to send me a picture, Jess. You got to send me a picture. Send me a picture of your camping shirt. How's it going, Elizabeth Ann? I appreciate it. By the way, Yvonne says she's wearing her camping shirt. Send me a picture of your camping shirt. She's wearing her fishing shirt. Send me a picture of your fishing shirt. We'll put it up on the Facebook page and elsewhere here on the Wells Report. Okay, let's get busy, shall we? Thanks very much for joining us, by the way. I appreciate it. So let's get busy. Hurricane Ian made landfall, so says USA Today, on the coast of South Carolina. It was wild. The storm got through Florida and then went just through the very smallest part of the Atlantic Ocean between Florida and South Carolina, re-energized, became a hurricane again, and smacked into South Carolina, inundating the region with potentially life-threatening flood and damaging winds. Just days after the storm battered Florida. We're going to think about this one for a long time. We're going to remember Ian like we do Camille and Harvey and Maria and all of these other gigantic storms that have waylaid the United States, especially the Southeast. Ian hit near Georgetown, South Carolina, 60 miles north of Charleston just after 2 p.m. as a Category 1 hurricane. Maximum sustained winds of 85 miles an hour. That's enough. The storm is expected to wreak havoc on the South Carolina, Georgia, and other states along the East Coast as it moves inland by tomorrow. Trees have been toppled, roads flooded. Over 69,000 households have already lost power in South Carolina. This according to officials in a news conference today. That number had risen to over 180,000 customers without power immediately after landfall. This according to poweroutage.us. The state's 5 shelters were at 15% capacity ahead of landfall. South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster said no deaths have been reported in the state yet, but there are still life-threatening conditions. He urged residents to stay off flooded roadways. Get out of the way. Get out of the way. What we are learning from Hurricane Ian, the brave idea of trying to stick it through, don't do it. Get out of the way. Get out of the way. By the way, according to South Carolina Henry McMaster, the governor, Henry McMaster, it's not as bad as it could have been. A lot of prayers have been answered, but we're not out of the woods. No, you are not. Ian is the first landfalling hurricane in South Carolina since Matthew in 2016. This, according to the Colorado State University hurricane researcher Phil Klotzbach. Officials in Florida, meanwhile, assessing damage, continuing the search and rescue efforts after Ian slammed into Fort Myers on Wednesday as a Category 4 storm. There have been 21 deaths, but Florida Emergency Management Director Kevin Guthrie said there's only one confirmed as a result of the storm. Officials are evaluating the cause of the 20 other deaths. There had been 700 rescues as of Friday morning. Meanwhile, 1.9 million customers were still without power across the state. Lee County was without water after a water main break. It's been a Herculean effort, said Florida Governor Ron DeSantis in a Friday morning news conference. Senators Marco Rubio and Rick Scott sent a joint letter to the Senate Appropriations Committee asking to provide as much monetary assistance as possible to Florida. Hurricane Ian will be remembered and studied as one of the most devastating hurricanes to hit the United States, they wrote. Communities across Florida have been completely destroyed. Lives have been forever changed. And that is absolutely true. Here's some of the bullet points that we have. In South Carolina, President Joe Biden declared an emergency, ordered federal assistance, according to the White House. Losses from Hurricane Ivan so far range between $25 and $40 billion. That, according to the Fitch Ratings Credit Agency. They reported that yesterday. 9 people were rescued after a boat with more than 20 migrants sank in stormy weather near the Florida Keys. On Friday, the Coast Guard said one person's body was recovered near Ocean Edge Marina. Airports in Tampa and Orlando expected to reopen today, while Fort Myers Airport in Southwest Florida remained closed today. More than 1,660 flights have been canceled today due to the storm. This, according to FlightAware. One last thing. The destruction left behind by Ian has made it difficult to get an accurate assessment of the loss of life. There are already reports of 21 deaths, only one confirmed as a storm-related death that we have reported already. State officials said only one of the deaths in Polk County was confirmed as a result of the storm. Authorities still evaluating the cause of the other 20 deaths. 8 were in Collier County, 12 in Charlotte County, where the only operating hospital is no longer accepting new patients due to a lack of capacity. This, according to Chris Constance, the county commissioner. Let's see. Local officials in these areas also report deaths. Sanibel Island officials report 2 deaths. In Lee County, which includes the island of Cayo Costa, near Cape Coral, where the storm made landfall, at least 5 deaths confirmed. In Deltona, 30 miles northeast of Orlando, a 72-year-old man died after falling into a canal while using a hose to drain his pool in the heavy rain. In Sarasota County, the sheriff's office reported 2 deaths related to the hurricane after a 94-year-old man and an 80-year-old woman died when their oxygen machines lost power during the storm. Oh. That's how USA Today looks at the very latest. Let's take a look at Fox News. Hurricane Ian made landfall in South Carolina as a Category 1 storm, according to the National Hurricane Center. Hurricane Ian made a third landfall near Georgetown, South Carolina, as a Category 1 storm with maximum sustained winds of 85 miles an hour. There is still a danger of life-threatening storm surge along the coast of the Carolinas, according to the National Hurricane Center. Hurricane-force winds are expected throughout the coasts of South Carolina and the southeastern portion of North Carolina. Areas from the Isle of Palms through Little River Inlet in South Carolina could see a storm surge of up to 7 feet. President Biden, speaking to reporters from the White House, discussed the actions his administration had taken in response to Hurricane Ian. The president said, quote, "I've directed that every possible action be taken to save lives and get help to survivors because every single it counts." This is a quote, okay? I've directed that every possible action be taken to save lives and get help to survivors because every single it counts. It's not just a crisis for Florida, it's an American crisis. We're all in this together. The president mentioned, that's the end of the quote. The president mentioned conversations he had earlier with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster. Hurricane Ian made landfall again Friday at 2:05 near Georgetown, South Carolina. My message to the people of South Carolina is simple. Please listen to all the warnings and directions from local officials and follow their instructions. Indeed, get out of the way. President Biden also touched on relief and recovery efforts in Florida, noting it would likely take years to rebuild, and assured the White House remained focused on recovery efforts in Puerto Rico. America's heart is literally breaking, he said. Quote, I have immense gratitude for the first responders and emergency crews who always show up no matter what. In times like these, Americans come together. They put aside politics. They put aside division. We come together to help each other. An additional 4 Florida counties were approved for individual assistance and debris removal as part of the major disaster declaration for the state of Florida. Elsewhere, South Carolina officials on Hurricane Ian next several hours are expected to be the worst. More about that as we continue here on the Wells Report. Thanks very much for joining us. We are here giving you the news. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We then make commentary. That's not the news. What we do is we tell you what we think. And then you tell us what you think. That's debate. News, analysis, commentary, debate. We do this Monday through Friday from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. Central Time live. And you can watch it on various podcasting outlets like YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, elsewhere. And we'll be waiting for you, okay? I would really appreciate it if you would join us. By the way, Elizabeth said, did Florida airport planes really flip? Yes, but probably not airliners, and a lot of boats hit the skids as well. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Okay, Jesse, I have to overrule you. Your camping shirt is a t-shirt. It is not a fishing shirt. Okay, so I appreciate you wearing your camping shirt on Fishing Shirt Friday, but that's a camping shirt, not a fishing shirt. Let's see, Yvonne is wearing a fishing shirt. Let me see if I can get that up here. Let me see if I can figure out how to do that. I think I have the technology to make this happen. And I'm going to try to share that with you right now. Okay, so there you go. Let's see, let me get over here first. All right. So I'm fiddling around with the technology here on the Wells Report because I can. And this is Friday and so on and so forth. So in case you want to know, this is what you wear on Fishing Shirt Friday. And by the way, nice accessories here. Look at this scarf. That is a, by gosh, Fishing Shirt Friday. She looks like she's wearing goggles. That's the beautiful Yvonne. So that's Yvonne, and we call her Evie. And so there you go. I am so very proud of you. Very nice. See? Fishing Shirt Friday. It ought to be a thing. I like Fishing Shirt Friday. And don't forget, they make fishing shirts for the wintertime, too. They're longer sleeves. I don't know whether I probably will. I'll probably get long sleeves. While we are on the subject of, pictures, flamingos at a Florida park found a way to do what people in Florida may not necessarily have thought of, which is to go to an interior bathroom with no windows and ride out the hurricane. Yeah. This happened at Sunken Gardens, a botanical park in St. Petersburg on the state's west coast. They put a whole bunch of flamingos into their restroom. Check this out. Yeah, this is great, isn't it? Let me see if I can blow this up a little bit. There you go. Yeah. See, look at that. All the flamingos hanging out in the ladies' room. Where else would you hang out if you were a flamingo? Anyway, so there you go. Flamingos in an interior room in their place, making sure that they're okay. That is very sweet. So there. All right. Just thought you'd like to see a little bit of that. Apparently, when they went ahead and sent that picture out, there were an awful lot of people that were very, very happy that they did that. Okay. Getting back to South Carolina, the mayors in impacted areas, this is South Carolina Governor McMaster, said that mayors in impacted areas are well prepared as Hurricane Ian's landfall was imminent on the coast, warned against complacency. This is not as bad as it could have been. A lot of prayers have been answered, but I would ask people, don't quit because this is still coming. This is not anything to play around with. If we've learned anything about hurricanes from Hurricane Ian, get out of the way. All right. So no deaths have been reported in the state. Life-threatening conditions are around. Don't forget, human error is the deadliest thing we have to deal with. The National Weather Service's John Quagliarello said that the strongest winds could occur in the evening for the northern Charleston area up through the Grand Strand. That's Myrtle Beach, that area. Storm surge flooding is going on. Peak values are expected to surge somewhere between 4 and 7 feet. That'll be north of the Isle of Palms. A 4.8-foot storm surge is being reported at Springmaid Pier in Myrtle Beach. This is the third highest water level on record in that location. Quagliarello pointed out that it was currently high tide as storm surge continues to build. The worst conditions were expected in the next couple of hours. You're up to date on Hurricane Ian. My name is John David Wells. This is the Wells Report. Thanks very much for being with us today. Call us 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Friday. Long week. Tough week, especially for our friends, neighbors, brothers, and sisters in Florida and South Carolina. Keep your thoughts with them today as we continue with the news, analysis, commentary, and debate next on the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thanks very much for joining us. The Wells Report for Friday, Fishing Shirt Friday in progress. And look, I want to tell you something here. Support this broadcast. This is an independent broadcast. It sort of happened that way. I left the radio station where I was doing the Wells Report, as you know, last September, and went down to the border to serve the Texas Military Department as a Texas State Guardsman during Operation Lone Star Border Surge. Now, by the way, anything I say about the Texas State Guard is my own. I'm solely responsible for what I'm saying. I do not speak for the Texas Military Department nor the Texas State Guard. I just happen to be a member of the Texas State Guard. It's one of the greatest organizations I've ever been a part of, and I'm proud to be a part of it. But that being said, when I came back, the radio station had been sold and the network had merged, and therefore this became an independent broadcast. And we're currently looking for a new home on several radio stations in Texas. Wish us luck. But if you'd like to support this broadcast, we would appreciate it if you would. Here's how you can do it. One, you can share it with your friends. If you find value in this broadcast, share it with your friends. Please do. Also, make sure you subscribe. Wherever you happen to see the broadcast, please do subscribe. I would appreciate it greatly. If you would like to support the show financially, you can do that by going to patreon.com/The Wells Report. Patreon.com/The Wells Report. You can donate. At some point, that's probably going to be a subscription service. In other words, what will end up happening is that you'll be able to see the show on Patreon, and we'll see how that works. But at some point, that will be a subscription. At this particular moment, it's just an opportunity for you to support the broadcast. Patreon, patreon.com/The Wells Report. I sure would appreciate it. I like doing this broadcast. I think it's important. I think it's necessary. You need to have a place where somebody is not yammering at you, but just trying to report the news for you. And I dare say that this is the place, the Wells Report. All right, here we go. So, before we go, I got to say hi to some people. That are here on the chat room. They're from all over the place, YouTube and Facebook, et cetera, et cetera. Also, we got a couple from Twitch. Mike R is here. Jesse is here. As you know, Elizabeth Ann has joined us. She suggests that I get a camouflage fishing shirt. I'm planning on doing that. Tried to get one last year, but they were all gone by the time I got there. All right. Curtis Charles, great human being, one of my dearest friends, and easily one of the best broadcast partners I ever had. We didn't do talk radio. We did race announcing. And Curtis Charles is one of the greatest race voices in the history of the art form. And Curtis, I miss you, man. It's good to hear from you. Thanks for coming by. Let's see who else is here. Kelly Lyon says hello from the great state of Oklahoma and the Oklahoma Department of Transportation. They are listening. Thank you so much for spending part of your Friday with us. I sincerely appreciate it. Elizabeth Ann, my daughter lives in Florida. News, I heard that water got turned off, but she says she's got water and it's not off. Elizabeth, ask her to give us a call, 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. Let's see who else. Hey, y'all, I sent Texas Baptist men some money. They're on their way to Florida to coordinate with FEMA. They're much better to give to than the American Red Cross because you know where your money's going. I will second that opinion by Gary Abshire. Make no mistake, the Red Cross is a wonderful organization. You're not wasting your money by sending them money. But Gary does make a good point. If you send money to the Red Cross, it goes into the general fund. Okay, so if you send money to the Dallas Baptist Men, which, by the way, is another superb organization, whenever I deploy with the Texas State Guard to a hurricane zone or something along that line, the Texas Baptist Men are right there with us. They are truly Americans that care about their other Americans and Texans and so on. They're just wonderful. Let's see. Gary does point out that the American Red Cross has a six-figure salary administrator to pay. Yeah, okay. Let's see. Does fishnet stocking count? No. On Fishing Shirt Friday, fishnet stockings do not count. Although you Sorry, you can send a picture for adjudication. Anyway, just saying. Let's see. Yvonne points out that her fishing shirt, an official fishing shirt, is Magellan. Okay, I don't know where my doggone fishing shirt is, says Elizabeth. Well, you need to find it. By the way, Yvonne points out that she's wearing a long sleeve fishing shirt, which will be handy this winter when we are doing Fishing Shirt Friday and it's cold. So, did the flamingos go there on their own, or did park personnel put them there? I don't know. I don't have any idea. Let's see. Jesse's upset because her camping shirt does not qualify for Fishing Shirt Friday. She says, now I got to go buy a fishing shirt. Yes. May I suggest that you go to Walmart? Walmart has fishing shirts, Magellans. They're not expensive. They're really, really good. And they're great shirts. Okay. No, Gary, I don't think that fishnet stockings count. So, and by the way, you don't need to send me a picture. Okay. If you're wearing fishnet stockings, that's okay. But I don't need a picture for adjudication. All right, I'm just saying. Let's see. Let's see. Mike Renouy says, hey, I'm driving. I just stopped for gas. It's $2.85. Great. That is good news. That is good news. Let's see. Kelly Lyons said, support this show, everyone. Thank you very much, Ms. Kelly. I sure do appreciate it. By the way, Gary points out that Duluth Outfitters has fishing shirts. Yes, they do. They've got a lot of really good stuff. Kind of really good stuff. I'm sorry, I'm distracted. Duluth Outfitters. Okay. Yes, that's a good store. They've got a lot of good stuff. As a matter of fact, I have some equipment that I bought from them, Duluth Outfitters, that I wear with my Texas State Guard stuff. So it's high quality stuff. Let's see what else. Fishnet stockings sounds like a maybe. You think it might be a maybe on fishnet? It would be Fishnet Friday. I'm not wearing fishnet stockings. Okay. Just not going to do it. I have several pairs of fishnet stockings, says Elizabeth Ann. It's so great to know, Elizabeth. Thank you. No, my fishnets are for netting shad for bait. Now, that's when you know you're talking about a real fisherman. When he catches fish to use fish for bait for other fish, that's a real fisherman. Yeah. Great to know that you have some fishnets there, Elizabeth. Nice. Thank you. Getting to know you. Getting to know. This is the Wells Report, getting back to the real important stuff. I know it's kind of Friday and it's kind of weird, but there you go. You just got to take care of the people. You got to take care of the peeps, especially when that kind of works with Twitter, doesn't it? If they tweet you, that's kind of a peep. Let's move on. The Texas and Arizona attorneys general today said that their states have stepped up to address the border crisis as a result of the federal government's failure under the Biden administration. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton and Arizona Attorney General Mark Brnovich joined the Faulkner Focus on Fox News to discuss how their states have responded to the crisis that have led to record-breaking levels of border crossings and the influx of drugs, including lethal fentanyl. This is a planned disaster by the Biden administration that's hurting Mark's state. That's hurting the entire country, said AG Paxton. The Texas AG said the Lone Star State is doing everything they can to stop people crossing the border. We're spending billions. We're doing everything we're allowed to do by law, said Paxton. Yet the Biden administration is doing everything to get around the law and doing everything they can to get as many people here as possible. Arizona AG Brnovich warned that more people have illegally entered our country through our southern border than the entire populations of Alaska, Vermont, and Wyoming combined. By the way, the Arizona AG warned about the influx of deadly fentanyl into communities. Just in the month of August, at the Nogales port of entry here in Arizona, more than 5 million fentanyl pills have been seized. More than 40 pounds of fentanyl powder. Put that in context, that's enough fentanyl to kill the entire population of New Jersey. Brnovich said that he and Paxton had been left to take the responsibilities disregarded by the federal government. Joe Biden incentivized and decriminalized these people breaking the law, said Brnovich. It shouldn't be up to Ken Paxton and myself to file lawsuits to try to force the Biden administration to not rescind Title 42, to try to deport people with deportation orders, to try to force them to build a wall. The attorneys general joined a special hour of Faulkner Focus on Fox News devoted to the border crisis after host Harris Faulkner traveled to Texas to report on the ongoing migrant surge. Brnovich went on to applaud Governors Greg Abbott of Texas, Ron DeSantis of Florida, for exposing liberal hypocrisy by busing migrants to sanctuary cities, triggering outrage from liberal leaders who are receiving only a bare fraction, of the influx of illegal migrants compared to border states. A.G. Paxton and Vice President Kamala Harris said that Vice President Kamala Harris is either, quote, not living in reality or lying, unquote, when she claimed that the southern border is secure. He went on to say, quote, I don't think there's any way anybody could possibly say the border is secure when we have record numbers. Not even just record numbers like a 300% increase from where President Trump was in office, and record numbers of people coming across committing crimes. We have an epidemic of fentanyl overdoses. This is all attributed to open border policies, and the Biden administration seems to want it. And indeed, it does. He makes a great case. He makes a great case. And then there's Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi today said that farmers in Florida need illegal immigrants, quote, to pick the crops, unquote, as she called for comprehensive immigration reform and said there was a shortage of workers in the U.S. Pelosi was asked about whether the southern border is secure, responded by saying that while we have a responsibility to secure our border, we also have a responsibility to recognize the importance of newcomers to our nation, unquote. Okay, this is opinion time. All right. The responsibility to secure the border is enumerated in the Constitution of the United States. It is something that the U.S. government shall do. The responsibility that Nancy Pelosi is talking about here, the responsibility to recognize the importance of newcomers to our nation, has nothing to do with the constitutional mandates of the federal government in the Constitution. And that she was allowed to say that she's got lots more. She had a bad day today. She said a lot of really stupid things, but this is the first one that Fox News put in their article. And it is remarkably stupid. Read the Constitution, Ms. Speaker. Read the Constitution. Figure out what the United States government is supposed to do, and providing a secure border is one of them. You need to make it happen and stop worrying about whether or not you're fulfilling your responsibilities to newcomers. You don't have any responsibilities to newcomers, Ms. Speaker. You do not. What kind of garbage just galls me? Ooh, that galls me. And by the way, that's not partisan. I'm quoting the Constitution, okay? Yeah, so yeah. What would have happened if, say, for example, Donald Trump had said that illegal immigrants need to be allowed into the country to pick the crops? Well, what would have happened? Anybody have any idea? Okay. Right now, she said, right now, this is her quote, right now, the best thing we can do for our economy is comprehensive immigration reform. Why haven't you done it? This has been a problem for decades. The Biden administration has had Democrat control of the House, Democrat control of the Senate, and Democrat control of the presidency. Normally, you would say the Democrat president, but actually, it's more Democrat control of the president, isn't it? Pelosi then pressed her economic argument, made reference to recent moves by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and other Republican governors to move illegal immigrants north to places like Martha's Vineyard, New York City, and Washington, D.C. Quote, we have a shortage of workers in our country, and you see even in Florida, some of the farmers and growers are saying, why are you shipping these immigrants up north? We need them to pick crops down here. I just think of what would have happened. The leftist media would have melted down if Donald Trump had said something like that. Wow. Pelosi's remarks come as the U.S. remains in the throes of a historic border crisis, which has seen more than 2.1 million migrant encounters this fiscal year, more than 200,000 migrant encounters in August alone. It's an ongoing nature of the crisis that has led to Republican governors to bus and fly migrants further north. Texas Governor Greg Abbott has bused more than 10,000 migrants to Washington, D.C., New York City, and Chicago, while DeSantis has sparked outrage from Democrats for flying 50 migrants to Martha's Vineyard. What needs to happen is that every self-proclaimed sanctuary city in the United States ought to be petitioning for the next group of migrants that both of the governors, Governor DeSantis and Governor Abbott here in Texas, are sending around. They should be petitioning to have these people come to their state or their city. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. Chat room is cooking. Jess says, literally, the government's job is to keep the border secure. She is completely correct. And yes, they would have lost their minds if President Trump had said, yeah, you know, these illegal immigrants, they need to be here to pick the crops. Nancy Pelosi says it, no big deal. Well, this double standard hypocrisy is starting to wear on me. How about you? So while we're talking about Nancy Pelosi's very bad day, a House Democrat blasted House Speaker Nancy Pelosi today for a failure of House leadership by refusing to call up legislation to impose tougher stock trading restrictions on members of Congress. This, by the way, the Stock Act, Susan, by the way, who is my wife and a Democrat, okay, pointed out that this was a very good idea. Amy Spanberger has come up with this, and more about that in a second. Did I say Amy? It's Abigail Spanberger. Sorry. She's a Democrat from Virginia. She'd been working with members since 2020 to call up a bill that would strengthen the provisions of the Stock Act. That's a 2012 law that prohibits lawmakers from using inside information to profit from stock trading. Support for a complete ban on trading by lawmakers grew this year. Spanberger accused Pelosi and other Democrat leaders of shutting it down. After first signaling her opposition to these reforms, well, yeah, she had money to make. The speaker purportedly reversed her position. However, our bipartisan reform coalition was then subjected to repeated delay tactics, hand-waving gestures, and blatant instances of Lucy from the comic strip Peanuts pulling the football. This moment marks a failure of House leadership. It's yet another example of why I believe the Democrat Party needs new leaders in the halls of Capitol Hill. She added that instead of finding consensus, Pelosi and other leaders chose to ignore these voices, push them aside, look for new ways they could string the media and the public along. Sort of like this comprehensive immigration reform. The last thing the Democrats want is comprehensive immigration reform, or they would have brought it up more than once. They just don't want it because if they establish rules, then they'd have to follow them. Now they don't have to follow them. Though there are still rules. There's still rules. But because nobody holds them account for breaking them, it becomes the status quo. The Constitution calls for secure borders. Why don't we have them? I mean, it goes on and on and on. Anyway, let's see. Pelosi responded to the criticism in that she said that Spanberger's original proposals were in the bill lawmakers were considering. Her bill is contained in this bill. Other members had ideas, too, to improve upon the bill. Pelosi said it makes no sense to call up the bill until the votes are there, and it's still a work in progress. Delaying tactics. Another House Democrat, Chris Pappas of New Hampshire, added that he is disappointed the Democrat leadership failed to call for a vote. The endless delays in this process are completely unnecessary. I'll continue to call for action on this issue until we have passed legislation that will prevent elected officials from using their positions of public service for personal gain. In the past few weeks, House Administration Committee Chair Zoe Lofgren of California took charge of the matter, finally provided an outline of a possible bill to House lawmakers. According to the outline, the bill would ban lawmakers, their spouses, and dependent children from trading stocks and owning a range of securities. The bill also included the Supreme Court and federal judges, the president and the vice president, and members of the Federal Reserve System's Board of Governors who oversee monetary policy. I believe they have a code of ethics that bans it already, but it's okay if there's law. However, the outline created an immediate split within the Democrat Party. House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer was one key Democrat who said the proposal did not go far enough. For example, Hoyer said he wanted to see tougher penalties for members of Congress who violated stock trading bans, which is a great and sneaky way to delay the bill. Delay the bill. Oh, it doesn't go far enough. It sounds like you're saying we've got to do more work to make this bill stronger. No. What you're saying is that you can't support the bill at this time this way. Why? Well, because there's money to make. Oh. So you see, this is basically it's an old school political trick. No, this bill doesn't go far enough. We've got to keep working on that bill until it goes far enough. It never will go far enough. It never will. I mean, it's very, very simple. Lawmakers, spouses, dependent children, the spouses and dependent children of Supreme Court federal judges, the president, vice president, members of the Federal Reserve System Board of Governors, they're all covered by that bill. What do you mean it doesn't go far enough? Of course it goes far enough. This is ridiculous. It became clear House Democrats would have no time to call up any Stock Act reform before the midterm elections. That's 4.5 weeks from now. 4.5 weeks from now. I wonder if it will come up before the end of the year. We'll keep track of that. Spanberger said the decision to let Lofgren take charge of the bill was one of several diversionary tactics and said the Democrats knew there would be no support for the Lofgren proposal. Well, of course. But, what happens is that you're able to stop the process before it has to actually go and do something. We've got money to make in the stock market. Just hush. Sit down and make a couple of investments. I'll send you my broker's phone number. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. That's hour number one. Hour number two is coming up next on this radio broadcast. Stay right there. Okay, darlings. Thanks again for being here. I sure appreciate it. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings. My name is John David Wells. We bring you the news, the real news, honest reporting. We bring you analysis that leads to news analysis, which is for facts and bias. We point out both. Then there is commentary, which is not the news. No, commentary is my opinion. It's just as valuable as yours, and that leads to debate. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. It's what we do every single day. Well, not every single day. Monday through Friday from 2 until 5 p.m. Central Time. Okay? We are live at that time, and you can join us live, and we sure wish you were. We sure wish you were. By the way, this is the first day of the State Fair of Texas. It is a perfect day. I started my day. Let me go over here. I started my day with 9 holes of golf with my buddy Ken Lynch. I beat him by 1 stroke. Don't laugh too loud, John, because he takes me out to Top Golf. Top Golf is wonderful and fun and so on and so forth. He takes me to Top Golf and kills me. We played 5 games. You know, the little chipping one where you go to the red target, then you go to the yellow target, then you go to the green target. We played 5 games. I won one game. One game. But I take him out on a golf course, and I took him out today. Yes. So anyway, I did that. But it is perfect weather, and you should go to Fair Park and see Big Tex and say, "Howdy, folks," which is how he sounds. Yeah, it's an awesome golf day. You should go out there. I really wanted to play 18. And what was kind of interesting, I go to this par 3 course. It's a little 9-hole course. It's beautiful. It's really well taken care of. And it's uphill and downdale. And these are serious hills, okay? You're walking uphill and downhill the entire time. And the difference between when I was playing this golf course last year and playing it this year, no huffing and puffing. I got to the end of 9 and said, you know what? I'd really, really like to play another 9, but I didn't have time. So I had to come and do the show today. And so there you go. But a beautiful day for the first day of the Texas State Fair. Head on over there and have some fun. And get a corny dog, okay? Fletcher's Corny Dogs. Ask for them by name. Don't get fooled by imitators or by deep-fried sweet potatoes either. Just saying. All right, the Supreme Court of the United States is starting another session. They will grapple with race, LGBTQ rights, election rules in a fraught new term that begins Monday. The justices in the nation continue to wrestle with the fallout from the decision in June to overturn Roe v. Wade. Okay, so this is USA Today copy. With affirmative action on the docket, along with immigration and a case about whether businesses may deny services for same-sex weddings, the High Court is not shying from opportunities to leave a mark once again on the American economy, culture, and politics. But as the 9 justices take their seats on Monday, the consequences of the previous term remain at the forefront of public awareness. The decision to wipe away the constitutional right to an abortion established by Roe in 1973. Okay. You know, when I point out we analyze the news for fact and bias, this is not only not factual, it is biased. Let me explain what I'm talking about. USA Today is discussing the Dobbs decision, which overturned the 1973 decision called Roe v. Wade. Okay? The USA Today copy says the decision to wipe away the constitutional right to abortion established by Roe v. Wade in 1973 is misinformation. It is not real. That's not true. There cannot be a constitutional right to anything established by a Supreme Court decision. There cannot be. In order to establish a constitutional right, you have to amend the Constitution to do so, just like they did for the Bill of Rights, the first 10. Okay, so you can't establish a constitutional right in the Supreme Court of the United States. It takes a 2/3 majority in both houses of Congress and 3/4 of the states to approve it before it becomes a constitutional amendment. This is untrue reporting. And what it is designed for, it must be designed for. This is my opinion, so I'll go over here. The story is very simple. This is an attempt to continue to foment public anxiety over the Dobbs decision. All that did was get the Supreme Court of the United States out of the constitutional amendment business. They have no constitutional right to be there in the first place. That's what the Dobbs decision did. It is essential that you actually know that truth. It's essential. And that the paper of record in the United States, USA Today, continually misreports it, needs to be called out. I will do so on this broadcast. USA Today is lying when it comes to the Dobbs decision. Their reporting is consistently wrong. It is terribly biased, and it does have a deleterious effect on the nation. It's awful, and it needs to stop. Moving on. By the way, the Dobbs decision, according to USA Today, did cause change in the midterm elections, sparked a dizzying series of challenges or changes to state abortion laws, and added to a sense the court's 6-3 conservative majority is just getting started. That's a supposition. Again, that's bias. There's no reason to think this coming term or any term in the foreseeable future will be any different, said Irv Gorenstein, a law professor and executive director of Georgetown University's Supreme Court Institute. On things that matter most, get ready for a lot of 6-3s. Well, just like there were a lot of 5-4s. And, this is not something that you need to worry about. A majority decision is going to be criticized by people on the other end of a majority decision. That is the minority. Many of the court's biggest decisions in June to expand access to weapons and further blur the line separating church and state. Once again, who is writing this? The bias is just unbelievable. Cleaved the 6 Republican-nominated justices from their 3-member liberal bloc, escalating a debate over the court's fidelity to precedent and whether some of the vote splits have as much to do with the ideology of individual justices as with the strict adherence to legal principles. There's so much wrong with that paragraph. Let me see if I can get it straight. Once again, fact and bias. Many of the court's biggest decisions in June, such as to expand access to guns and further blur the line separating church and state. Okay, here's the situation. Okay, that's a misnomer, first of all, church and state. What the Constitution does is establish a separation of state and church, not church and state. State and church. The state will make no law abridging the freedom of religion. The state will not create a religion. It's not church and state. It's state and church. That's thing number one. Then they decry the fact, this article decries the fact that it cleaved the 6 Republican-nominated justices from the 3-member liberal bloc, escalating a debate over the court's fidelity to precedent and whether some of the vote splits have as much to do with the ideology of individual justices as with strict adherence to legal principles. First of all, not strict adherence to legal principles, strict adherence to constitutional principles. The Supreme Court of the United States interprets the Constitution or uses laws that are brought before it or lawsuits brought before it to put through a constitutional lens to interpret the Constitution. It's not about legality. The legality is handled way before it gets to the Supreme Court of the United States. The Supreme Court provides a constitutional test, not a legal one. Is this law constitutional or not? That's what the Supreme Court does. A few of the justices have weighed in on the split of the Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts defended the court, arguing critics should not question its legitimacy because they disagree with an opinion. Associate Justice Elena Kagan appeared to contradict the assessment, warning the court risks weakening its stature if the public views its work as political. This was something that I think was very funny. When Elena Kagan was the Solicitor General of the United States, argued against the Defense of Marriage Act, and then ruled on the Defense of Marriage Act as a member of the Supreme Court, and she's worried about the political aspects of it. Well, that particular horse is out of the barn. Justice Kagan, I pointed that out then. I'll point it out now. Many of the court's most controversial decisions last term were celebrated by the right. Polls show public confidence took a hit. 4 in 10 Americans said they approved of the Supreme Court in a recent Marquette Law School poll. That was a 26% point slide from 2 years ago. Interesting that they'll report on the approval rating of the Supreme Court, but won't report on the approval rating of the President of the United States. Talk about allowing their political principles to color their judgment. Once again, pot, meet kettle. Major cases this term: a free speech challenge to Colorado's anti-discrimination law from a website developer who wants to deny her services for same-sex marriages because of her religious objections. President Joe Biden's administration, meanwhile, is fending off a lawsuit from Texas and Louisiana over how much discretion the federal government has to prioritize certain immigrants for deportation. Just beyond the debate over the court's legitimacy, the question about some of the justices' commitment to precedent, so on and so on. And they talk about the decision to overturn Roe a one-off or the result of deeply personal and decades-long battles over Roe. No, it's a deeply held personal and decades-long battle over what constitutes a constitutional amendment. And none of this is being reported properly. None of it. That's why you're here. That's why when I say we honestly report the news, we honestly report the news. We honestly report the news using the news that reports it dishonestly. We point out bias and fact on this broadcast. The Supreme Court rarely overturns its decisions. The principle of stare decisis, adherence to prior rulings, gives stability to law, but it rarely doesn't mean never, especially when it comes to Roe v. Wade. There's a huge constitutional problem. The Supreme Court of the United States, had it been, say, one of the circuit courts, would have overturned the Roe v. Wade decision before it got to the Supreme Court. See what I mean? It was unconstitutional for the court to make that decision in the first place. This reestablishes the court as an arbiter of the Constitution, as opposed to an architect of the Constitution. Let me say that again. The Dobbs decision returned the Supreme Court of the United States to being an arbiter of the Constitution instead of an architect of it. You need to pass that one around. That's a quote worth remembering. And that's not being reported by the mainstream media. And that is just plain dishonest on so many levels. This is the Wells Report. Stick around. We'll be back with more coming up in just a couple of moments. Thanks for being here. Back in a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Welcome to the broadcast. It's Friday, Fishing Shirt Friday. Mike Renweed does not have a fishing shirt. Mike, you need to get a fishing shirt. Go down to Walmart and get a fishing shirt. By the way, I'm trying to come up with Wells Report patches. If you are watching on the Wells Report stream, okay, on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, you will note that there is a logo that is maddeningly placed in the upper right-hand corner of the screen that you're watching on that says the Wells Report. I'm going to have that made into very high-resolution patches. Okay, 4-inch patches, designed to fit, well, let's see, right over here. Okay, so get a fishing shirt, and if you get a fishing shirt and you send me a picture of it, I will send you one of these patches as soon as I get them made. Don't hassle me right now. I don't have them done yet. But believe it or not, and I'll talk about this coming up in just a little bit, people are actually supporting the show financially. And so I'm going to be investing back into the show. And I think one of the first things I'm going to do are these patches. So you can put your yeah, I'll find a fishing shirt. Try to find one that's in mossy oak camo, because those are hard to find. You want a short sleeve one and a long sleeve one, and they're hard to find because after hunting season, gone. Okay, just so you know. All right. So let me get to this real fast because we're running out of time in this segment. I think there's a backlash about the political exploitation of the Dobbs decision, which overturned Roe v. Wade. You know, I told you that the pendulum was going to swing and then there was going to be some upheaval in the country for a while, just like there was in 1973. Well, it's happening again. People are going too far, not going far enough, et cetera, et cetera. This will all settle out. But this time, the people who organized the Women's March, who said that the group was pro-choice, now have said that they are proudly pro-abortion. Remember when I talked about the Democrat Party being afraid of saying they were pro-abortion, so they hide behind pro-choice? It's not pro-choice. It's pro-abortion. That's the difference between politics and honesty. Well, the Women's March said, we're proudly pro-abortion. And the Twitter sphere went nuts. Critics, by the way, noticed that the feminist group was now admitting the truth, especially after years of liberals claiming that it's only pursuing protections for a women's right to choose. Some mocked the group for clinging to the name Women's March, suggesting a more inclusive and progressive name might be the Birthing Persons March. The left-wing organization yesterday, which gained notoriety during the Trump presidency, said, we're not just pro-choice, we are proudly, unapologetically pro-abortion. Retweet if you agree. They instead were flooded, instead of being flooded with support, the group's tweet received heaps of scorn. Twitter verified Catholic priest Father Matthew Schneider tweeted, the mask is off. They're fully for killing innocent unborn human persons. Conservative journalist Kyle Becker mocked the group for using the term woman in their name. By the way, where's the Birthing Persons March handle? Get in line, Stalinist right-wing deviationists. Whoa. The Blaze, Jessica O'Donnell wrote, we get it. You salivated the murder of innocent babies. You're vile. In response to a pro-choice person calling the tweet kind of disgusting, Donald quipped, it seems they've lost the safe and rare motto. They have. Conservative musician 5 Times August said, why would anyone ever be proud of an abortion? It's not supposed to be a bucket list accomplishment. Good grief, you birthing persons are soulless creeps. And it goes on and on and on. Not just conservatives. I think there's a backlash brewing. And I think people ought to know it. And I think people are getting tired of leftists screaming about how people are idiots except them. That's what I'm thinking. You're listening to The Wells Report. Back with more coming up in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. Something that I have noticed that is very disturbing to me, and it is pervasive in the mainstream media. And I want you to stick with me on this. The third rail of American journalism these days seems to be you cannot discuss any type of disagreement regarding the constantly hammered orthodoxy of the results of the 2020 presidential election. It is something that you cannot touch. The only time I ever got flagged by YouTube on this broadcast ever had to do with something that they misconstrued on one of my shows. I appealed it, and apparently my appeal was granted. Because I explained what I was talking about. They missed it. You know, they listened to it, and once again, without that explanation. I will tell you that it wasn't one of my most precise statements regarding the 2020 election, because I'm normally very careful. Because what I will say is I believe there were problems with the election. I believe we should look closer at it. I also believe that Joe Biden won the election and he's the president of the United States. I also said that, oh, by the way, the truth doesn't have to be hammered home every single moment, every single chance when somebody says something in the public sphere that casts aspersions on the 2020 election. This is where news becomes propaganda, but fast. Because the very harsh put-downs involved in anyone, and I'm about to show you one, the very harsh put-downs of anybody who disbelieves the 2020 election orthodoxy as dictated by the mainstream media, and it's just a mainstream media thing, is damaging, and it's also concerning to me. This is something we should all be concerned about. I'm not talking about the election. I'm talking about how the mainstream media's orthodoxy on it is so consistent, and the criticism of anybody against that orthodoxy is so strident, indeed bellicose, that it looks very, very fascist, at least political machinery. This is political machinery here. Why? Why is it political machinery? Well, maybe it's because there's a political machine. Here's somebody who just reacted to that, by the way. He says, why not hammer home the truth? The truth should never be denied. I'm sitting there looking at this. This is a college-educated person. This is a college-educated person here. Okay? Then he points out, well, just like 9/11 events versus the truthers, no room for lies. Truthers don't get hammered because they say that they believe that the toppling of the Twin Towers was an inside job. You don't see that. What you do is you see investigations. You see investigations, and you see videos of investigations. You can go to YouTube right now, see an investigation that proves that truthers are wrong. You can't see that. You cannot see this on YouTube. You can't see the debunking. All you see is somebody saying the 2020 election was absolutely the most secure election in the history of people. And anybody who disagrees gets hammered. And people believe it, as we just saw. Right here. This guy thinks it's gospel. How do you know? It's never been investigated yet. Not truly investigated. So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about here. Ginny Thomas is the wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. She appeared Thursday before the January 6th committee investigating the January 6th incursion or not insurrection, not even an incursion, a riot at the Capitol. The committee has for months sought the interview in an effort to know more about Ginny Thomas's role in trying to help Donald Trump overturn his election defeat by Joe Biden. Now, that is a supposition that Donald Trump was trying to overturn the election. Okay, just point that out. Once again, this is biased. This, by the way, is from The Guardian, which is an offshore newspaper. I went there on purpose. Ginny Thomas texted Trump White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows and contacted lawmakers in Arizona and Wisconsin in the weeks after the election. She did not answer questions from reporters when she arrived for the interview or later when she left for a break. But Thomas did tell reporters she was looking forward to answering questions from the members of the committee. Testimony from Thomas was one of the remaining items for the committee as it nears its completion of work. The panel interviewed more than 1,000 witnesses and showed some testimony in 8 public hearings. Thomas's attorney, Mark Paoletta, said last week Thomas was eager to answer the committee's questions to clear up any misconceptions about her work relating to the 2020 election. The extent of her involvement in the Capitol attack is unclear. In the days after the presidential election was called for President Biden, Thomas emailed 2 lawmakers in Arizona, urging them to choose a clean slate of electors and stand strong in the face of political and media pressure. The AP obtained the emails earlier this year under the state's open records law. Good. Thomas said in interviews she attended a pro-Trump rally near the White House on the morning of January 6th, but left before President Trump spoke and crowds attacked the Capitol. Thomas has reportedly maintained that her political activities posed no conflict of interest with the work of her husband, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. Like so many married couples, we share many of the same beliefs, principles, and aspirations for America, Thomas told the Washington Free Beacon in March. But we have our own separate careers and our own ideas and opinions, too. Justice Clarence does not discuss his work with me. I don't involve him in my work. Justice Thomas was the lone dissenting voice when the Supreme Court ruled in January to allow a congressional committee access to presidential diaries, visitor logs, speech drafts, and handwritten notes relating to the events of January 6th. Ginny Thomas had been openly critical of the committee's work, including signing a letter to House Republicans calling for the expulsion of Liz Cheney of Wyoming and Adam Kinzinger of Illinois for joining the January 6th committee. So there's that. Now that's offshore. And that's reasonable. That's a reasonable article. Okay, there's a little bias in it, but listen to this. This from the New York Times. Ginny Thomas discussing election subversion efforts with her husband. The New York Times accusing Ginny Thomas of being a subversive. Virginia Thomas, here's the article. Virginia Thomas, the wife of Justice Clarence Thomas and a conservative activist who pushed to overturn the 2020 election. I don't think she pushed to overturn it. I believe she pushed to have it investigated. There is a difference. Now, that's just my opinion. Virginia Thomas told a House committee investigating the January 6th attack on the Capitol that she never discussed those efforts with her husband during a closed-door interview in which she continued to perpetrate the false claim that the election was stolen. The false claim. Perpetrate the false claim. The lie that. The debunked theory that. Blah, blah, blah. Leaving the interview, which took place in an office building near the Capitol and lasted for 4 hours, Ms. Thomas smiled in response to reporters' questions, but declined to answer any of them. She did, however, answer questions behind closed doors. Representative Benny Thomas, Democrat of Mississippi, and the chairman of the committee, who added that her testimony could be included in the upcoming hearing. If there's something of merit, it will be. During her interview, Ms. Thomas, who goes by the name Ginny, repeated her assertion. The 2020 election was stolen from President Donald J. Trump, a belief she insisted upon in late 2020 as she pressured state legislators and the White House Chief of Staff to do more to try to invalidate the results. In a statement she read at the beginning of her testimony, Ms. Thomas denied having discussed her post-election activities with her husband. In her statement, a copy of which was obtained by the New York Times, Ms. Thomas called it an ironclad rule that she and Justice Thomas never speak about cases pending before the Supreme Court It is laughable for anyone who knows my husband to think I could influence his jurisprudence. The man is independent and stubborn with strong character traits of independence and integrity. The interview, I'm sure. The interview ended months of negotiations between the committee and Ms. Thomas over her testimony. Committee's investigators had grown particularly interested in her communications with John Eastman, a conservative lawyer who was in close contact with Mr. Trump and wrote a memo that Democrats and anti-Trump Republicans have likened to a blueprint for a coup. At this point, we're glad she came in, said Mr. Thompson. After Ms. Thomas' appearance yesterday, her lawyer, Mark Paoletta, said that she'd been happy to cooperate with the committee to clear up the misconceptions about her activities. She answered all the committee's questions. As she has said from the outset, Ms. Thomas has significant concerns about fraud and irregularities in the 2020 election. And as she told the committee, her minimal and mainstream activity focused on ensuring that reports of fraud and irregularities were investigated. Beyond that, she played no role in any events in the 2020 election results. As she wrote in a text to Mark Meadows at the time, she also condemned the violence on January 6th. She abhors violence on any side of the aisle. So let's talk about this. Ms. Thomas said very, very straightforwardly through her lawyer, right? It is very straightforward. She played no role in any events after the 2020 election results. She has said from the outset she has significant concerns about fraud and irregularities in the 2020 election. Her minimal activity for ensuring reports of fraud and irregularities were investigated. That's all I'm calling for. I want the fraud and irregularities investigated. And that, by the way, does not mean you go back and count the same votes you've counted 3 times by now or audited. No, you investigate the fraud and irregularities. Instead of just having a lawyer or a judge, for example, say, you don't have standing in this court to make this claim, therefore the entire lawsuit is gone. Somebody needs to stand up and say, hey, we need to look at this. We need to look at these allegations, and we need to follow them up. We need to do an investigation on these things. That's all I've ever asked for. And it's amazing how I get shouted down. And everybody who says the same thing gets shouted down. Let me give you this. This is from USA Today. This is from Rex Hupke, okay? This is an opinion piece. Listen to, and this, by the way, the paper of record in the United States, the USA Today. Listen to how he describes Ginny Thomas and her opinions. It has appeared for some time that Jimmy Thomas, the conservative activist and wife of U.S. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, quote, swims in the shallow end of the reality pool. Is that a nasty thing to say about somebody? After the 2020 presidential election, she texted this to then President Donald Trump's chief of staff, quote, Biden crime family and ballot fraud co-conspirators, elected officials, bureaucrats, social media censorship mongers, fake stream media reporters, etc., are being arrested and detained for ballot fraud right now and over the coming days and will be living in barges off Gitmo to face military tribunals for sedition, unquote. And then Hupke goes, okay, that's enough to make anyone get up and slowly walk away, careful not to make any sudden moves. See what's happening here? He is ridiculing her. He is shaming her. You know, we get to speak our minds in public in the United States of America. It's called the First Amendment. So does Rex Hupke. But there's a certain level of decorum necessary here. It's called manners, Rex. It's okay to disagree with someone. If you don't know how to do it, just listen to this broadcast. It's okay to disagree with someone. But you don't have to be snippy and snarky and snotty and all that kind of stuff. This is clearly inappropriate. He goes on to say, of course, a lot of people these days toss around baseless conspiracy theories for clicks, money, or attention. So it was fair to wonder if Ginny Thomas's prattle was all for show. It turns out that it's not. Following Thomas's closed-door interview before the January 6th committee yesterday, we learned her conspiratorial rhetoric reflects true beliefs. Committee Chairman Representative Benny Thompson said afterwards that Thomas had again stated her conviction that the 2020 presidential election was stolen from President Trump. She was not under oath, but making any materially false, fictitious, or fraudulent statement to Congress is a crime. She clearly believes what she believes. And then he tries to say, well, obviously she has some way of influencing Clarence Thomas, and then goes on that jag. What I'm trying to point out is not whether somebody believes in the 2020 election or not. What I'm pointing out is the media will stomp you if you disagree with the orthodoxy that the 2020 election was just fine. That is food for thought. This is the Wells Report. Back in a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thanks very much for joining me. Shannon Brandt, the man who is accused of fatally running over Kayler Ellingson with an SUV, has been charged with murder in the death of the 18-year-old. New information alleges that the teenager was run over by an SUV. Brandt is 41 years old. He was initially arrested after police say he fatally hit Ellingson with an SUV during the early morning hours of September 18th after a street dance that took place at a local bar in McHenry, North Dakota. Court documents state that Brandt initially fled the scene and told a 911 operator Ellingson was part of a Republican extremist group, adding the teenager was calling on others to come get him. He was released from jail September 20th after posting a $50,000 bond. While it was not placed on house arrest or curfew, he could not leave North Dakota or drink alcohol. North Dakota Highway Patrol Captain Brian Nywind told Fox News Digital there was no evidence suggesting the teenager was part of a Republican extremist group or that the incident involved politics, which is not what the guy who hit him said. Foster County State Attorney Kara Brinster announced today that Brandt is being charged with murder in addition to duty in an accident involving death. Brinster said that the charge of criminal vehicular homicide has been dismissed because of the new murder charge. Brandt turned himself in today at the Stutsman County Correctional Center. The new charges are a result of an investigation by the North Dakota Highway Patrol, according to Foster County Sheriff's Department, this is an investigation by the North Dakota Highway Patrol, Foster County Sheriff's Department, and the North Dakota Bureau of Criminal Investigation. A probable cause affidavit for the new charges states that Brandt asked the 911 operator if he was going to prison. I just want to ask you a question. Am I going to prison? During the 911 call, Brandt made comments regarding the incident being intentional and not an accident. Ooh. According to the affidavit, when the 911 operator asked he wouldn't let your vehicle go, then what happened? And Brandt responded, yes, I just tried to take of, and he wasn't going to let me go. I hit him. I didn't mean to, and he's subdued. I was scared to death, but he's subdued. He can't do anything to me now, so this is why I'm calling you. I mean, I almost just ran away, but I thought, geez, obviously if it was a total accident, I shouldn't be scared, but I know it was more than that. Okay. For those people that are young, there used to be a show called Dragnet. Okay. And Jack Webb was the star of the show, and he always talked like this. He never really said much. It was very short clip sentences. Just the facts, man. He always used to talk about your Miranda rights. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. That includes 911 calls. Okay. Ellingson called his mother before Brandt admitted to using an SUV to hit him, according to an affidavit, and told her that he or they were chasing him. The mother told her son that she was on her way to get him prior to the call. Brandt also told the 911 operator that Ellingson wouldn't let him leave, made a call to someone saying something to the effect of, "You're going to have to come here and handle him." According to the affidavit, during the time between 2 a.m. and 2:42, Ellingson only placed and received phone calls to his mother and his father. An autopsy on Ellingson indicated his injuries were caused by being run over by an SUV, not being struck by the front of the car. And so the situation is as follows, at least the way I see it. This, as reported originally, was a murder based on a conversation, a political conversation. That's the way it looks to me. Now, I'm not saying anything about the guy. I'm not saying anything about Shannon Brandt, nor would I. I don't believe in having trials being trials by talk radio. I find it ridiculous. But I do want to point out this. This is a perfect example of someone who is now no longer with us because of political rhetoric, not just their own, but the political rhetoric that has divided this nation into vein-bulging, spit-slinging arguments between people over concepts that are mostly theoretical. And what has to happen is we all have to chill out. Just because we disagree does not mean we have to be snarky, mocking, disrespectful. We don't have to be. state your case. I'll state mine. Discuss the merits of your case. I'll discuss the merits of my case. It's called debate. It should be polite. It should be respectful. And I, by the way, actually get to impose that on chat rooms and discussion boards that have the name The Wells Report on them. Because we're after light, not heat. There's too much heat. Cost this kid his life. You think about that the next time you hear some politician standing and calling for violence in defense of their political ideologies. This is The Wells Report. Back with more next hour. Thanks very much for joining us. Okay, hour number 3 right around the corner. Thanks again. See you in a minute. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thanks very much for joining us. What do we do on this broadcast? We bring you the news. We bring you the news honestly. We analyze the news for bias and fact. We point out both. We make commentary. That is not the news. That's just my opinion. Just as valuable as yours. And then we debate. We debate those opinions and the news and the analysis, the facts, the bias. We report and debate on today's news. That's what this is all about. Your part in the debate can be had by joining us on the chat room. Please, by all means, do so. The chat room is available on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch. Okay, you can do that if you'd like to. The other thing is that you can call us on the telephone, 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. Okay? So we're getting close to the midterm elections. We're getting close to what's referred to as the October surprise. This is where, in October, there are circumstances that are brought to the fore for political effect. They are usually surprising. They are usually incredibly damaging. Now we find ourselves in a position where the Republican Party has, for all intents and purposes, fired the first serious shot in what is the October surprise season. I have what they have released today. I'm going to play it for you on the Wells Report, courtesy of YouTube. So watch carefully.
2 years into the Biden presidency, America is on the wrong track. So how did we get here? On day one, Joe Biden moved to kill domestic energy production. Then, with the help of Democrats in Congress, he set out on a massive spending spree, ignoring warning signs about inflation.
This is going to potentially overheat the economy.
If you overheat the economy longer and longer, you get more and more inflation.
Inflation skyrocketed, reaching the highest rate in 40 years. The Biden administration also weakened enforcement at the border and stopped building the wall. This led to a record number of migrants crossing into the country, bringing deadly drugs into communities all across America.
A growing fentanyl crisis is wreaking havoc across the nation from an increase in drug smuggling at the southern border.
The Biden administration let 2 million people illegally into the country.
Human traffickers and drug cartels are telling people you can get in.
We cannot sustain this.
Overseas, the Biden administration failed America with a disastrous and deadly withdrawal from Afghanistan.
13 brave Americans killed at the Kabul airport.
This is our leaders' fault.
This is a horrible wound to our reputation.
This emboldened our enemies.
Our adversaries are going to be testing the United States of America after this debacle. Russia and the Baltics, China and Taiwan.
This year, with the economy now in recession, Democrats passed even more reckless spending and inflation got worse.
Naming it anti-inflation is a joke.
America seems trapped in a vortex of bad economic news.
As gas prices go up, his approval rating goes down.
When you shut down the Keystone Pipeline, what did you really think would happen?
Record crime, record homicides.
They have been soft on crime. They've been terrible for the communities that they say they have in their focus.
Record inflation, endless spending, an economy in recession, open borders, and surging crime. That is the Biden legacy in just 2 years.
They couldn't have done worse if they had planned to do worse.
Nothing is built, nothing is back, and nothing is better.
He has made one bad decision after another.
Senate Republicans are focused on America's top priorities, while Democrat mismanagement and failure has resulted in runaway inflation, reckless spending, record crime, and chaos at our southern border. A new Senate Republican majority is prepared to lead in a different direction.
And so this first shot is being fired by the Republicans. And there's a whole sequence of these on YouTube, which is where we got that particular video. The Senate Republican Conference released a new video today highlighting the failures of the Biden administration, as well as the issues it said Republicans should and would address should the party win control of the body in November midterm elections. The video is titled The First 2 Years, narrated by Senator John Barrasso, the Republican from Wyoming. Blasted President Biden over rising crime, decades-high inflation, the border crisis, the ongoing economic recession plaguing Americans across the country. The sharp attacks from Republicans come less than 6 weeks before Election Day, in which Fox News power rankings predict Republicans will win the House of Representatives. The Senate, on the other hand, remains a toss-up. This is going to be an effective ad. There will be others. And these back and forth haymakers are going to increase as time goes by. In this particular case, I listen to it and I realize the facts behind most of what's being said. Now, I hope that when Democrats come back with their particular points of view, and we'll play them here, I'm hoping that they will stick to the same factual basis. Interesting, the politics, the unspoken part of the broadcast of that particular commercial, that was handled by the pictures. You know, a new generation of a new Senate leadership. They're talking about Mitch McConnell, and Mitt Romney was in that montage of photographs. I'm going, really? That is not something that is going to actually generate votes for you. What they should have done is put Tom Cotton there. They should have put some other people in those particular pictures. Mitch McConnell is a liability for the Republican Party, and certainly Mitt Romney is. A lot of the others, not so bad. Not so bad. Okay, so there you go. That is where we stand from a standpoint of the 2020 midterms. What do you think about that? What do you think about that? Give us a call, 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. In this particular conversation, I have been accused of mocking Senator John Kerry. Okay? And I have. I call him John the Stupid Kerry. And the reason is because, in my opinion, he's kind of dumb. Now, he doesn't care what I think about him, his what I consider to be unbelievable hubris, his arrogance. You know, he wouldn't think one thing or another about anything I say. He's also a public figure. He is a public figure. He bought into all this. Former presidential candidate, former Secretary of State, and he knows exactly what's going on when he steps into the public sphere. Ginny Thomas, the wife of Clarence Thomas, on the other hand, has not stepped into that sphere. And she does not deserve the mocking and the heckling based on her ideology. For the most part, the reporting of Ms. Thomas's testimony before the January 6th committee was at least reasonably respectful, except, of course, for Rex Hupke's op-ed piece, which was just a deliberate stomping. The rest of it was, while the New York Times article, you know, once again preaching an orthodoxy over and over and over, using exactly the same words, it's like, I keep telling them, you really don't have to sell the truth. But you really do have to sell a lie. The more you sell the truth, the more it looks like you're selling a lie. What I would suggest is they stop it. I would suggest they just move away. Nothing's going to change the results of the 2020 election. Nothing. There's an old axiom: when you do something brilliant on a football field or a baseball field or a golf course or something, you act like you've been there before. That's what the mainstream media needs to do when it comes to questions about the 2020 election. And once again, it's not the election that I have a problem with. It's investigating the election and the stopping of anybody who would want to do that. The lack of investigation and the stopping of anybody who says, we really ought to check this out. I'm talking about the fraud, the assertions of fraud and deceit surrounding the 2020 election. I'm not talking about the vote count. That's a completely different circumstance. And by the way, preaching that the vote count means that nothing happened illegally, those two statements don't go together. But they are carrying the day because the mainstream media wants them to carry the day. Now, I got off on a tangent there. Getting back to John Kerry. John Kerry is a guy who preaches you've got to reduce your carbon footprint as he flies all over the world in a private jet. That kind of hypocrisy is ridiculous. Plus, he's not really smart. He is not really smart. When he was doing the Iran nuclear deal, I was poking holes in it just based on what I knew about the deal. Just stuff in open source, just stuff in the media. I was poking holes in it. This is wrong. This is wrong. This is what's going to happen. This is what's not going to happen. Everything that I said that was going to happen is indeed happening. The Iranians are hell-bent on creating a weapon that will be their demise. And all this rhetoric, we will not allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon. Well, then why doesn't the deal clearly point that out? Why doesn't the Iranian nuclear deal say, hey, if you turn your stuff in to us right this very moment, or Russia if you'd like, if you would turn that stuff in and completely back away from nuclear weaponry, you won't have any trouble with us. That's not what the deal says. The deal says, well, you can enrich this much by this time, and then you can enrich that much by that time, and you can do this and do that, and so on and so on. And so what happens is that it guarantees an Iranian nuclear weapon, which guarantees a nuclear exchange between Israel and Iran. Guarantees it. Everything that I've said about that deal came true. I'm not a former Secretary of State. I'm a guy with a brain who can read. And apparently, John the Stupid Kerry believes that nobody is smart enough to understand the nuance of what he's putting down. Sir, that's kind of psychopathic, if you ask me. And there's one thing to be confident, one thing to be arrogance, one thing to be saturated with hubris. But you're rearranging reality to sort your ego. And that's disturbing. But I'm telling you, if there ever is a nuclear exchange between Israel and Iran, it's going to have John Kerry's fingerprints on it. More about this in just a couple of moments. You stay there. This is the Wells Report. Thanks for joining us. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Telephone number is 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. So we were talking about Ginny Thomas. Alan Schaefer is a friend of the broadcast. He is someone who has a different political ideology than I do. And he says that I was upset with Rex Hupke. He was the guy that did the op-ed piece that was excessively snarky and disrespectful to Ginny Thomas about her ideas regarding the 2020 presidential election, which are perfectly fine. She just disagrees with him, and he questioned her intellect and was essentially disrespectful to the wife of a Supreme Court justice. Well, Mr. Schaefer points out that when the spouse of a Supreme Court justice injects herself into politics, especially in the way Ginny Thomas did, she becomes a public figure. No, she doesn't become a public figure. You don't become a public figure until you're either appointed to or elected by, appointed to an office by an elected official, or you are elected yourself. Or if you happen to be somebody like me, who puts themselves into the public sphere as a public trustee, in my humble opinion. It's one thing for you to disrespect, or not disrespect, but certainly disagree with my opinions. But most people, including yourself, Alan, you do that very nicely, and I appreciate it. I do. But what has to happen here, as we saw with a teenager being run over by a guy, apparently on purpose because they had a political disagreement, which was fomented out of other political disagreement, which is fomented from division. The president of the United States accuses 74 million of his countrymen of fascism. That kind of stuff is detrimental. The scorched earth I was talking about the Democrat Party practicing in the United States. That's the scorched earth I'm discussing. That's got to stop. My point in the entire discussion was not the 2020 election or Ginny Thomas's opinion of it. It's the crushing orthodoxy of a mainstream media that will stomp anybody who disagrees with it within the pages of their paper, usually snarkily, usually disrespectfully. I think that's wrong. That's what I was talking about. Because as we've seen, people are getting killed over it. It's time for politicians to stop it. It's time for politicians to stop egging on the mob. It's essential that we get there from here. I happen to believe that the greatest rallying point for Americans from one end of the country, north to south, literally north to south, coast to coast, are the founding documents of this nation. We can all agree on that, can't we? Or can we? And if we can't agree on those, why can't we agree on those? Well, it can only be one reason, which gets us right back to the division part. People who don't believe in the Declaration of Independence, Constitution, Bill of Rights, are they pro-American or un-American? If they're un-American, why? Is there a hill to die on named the U.S. Constitution? I believe there is. Will I die on that hill? Absolutely. How about you? This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report on Fishing Shirt Friday. Thanks very much for wearing your fishing shirt today. Actually, Yvonne Field is wearing her fishing shirt, and I am very proud to know that she's wearing her fishing shirt because I'm wearing mine. When you pay attention to the Wells Report on Fridays, make sure you wear your fishing shirt. Fishing Shirt Friday. I think it's a thing. I think we should make it a thing. I think it's cool because it actually is cool. So what I want you to do here is I'd like you very much to please share this broadcast with your friends. If you find value in it, if you find value in an honest reporting of the news, a careful analysis of fact and bias, if you care about reasoned commentary, respectful commentary, and debate that's also respectful, listen, you don't have to agree with me. That's not the point. The point is I need your voice to be heard just like mine. We should debate these things. Your voice should be heard. That's why we have a telephone number, 2172. We also have a chat room. And I'll do my absolute dead level best to be fair to your particular narrative. But if you really want me to hear what you have to say, call me, 817-379-2172. But share this broadcast, subscribe to it. If you'd like to support the show financially, go to patreon.com. Patreon.com will create a circumstance whereby you can throw $1 at me a month. $1 a month. If you want to do $2, that's fine. $5, that's great. $10, that's fine. Yeah, I think you can also make a one-time contribution if you'd like. But if you'd like to do that, I sure would appreciate it because this is an independent broadcast. There's nobody looking over my shoulder. I'm solely responsible for the content on this broadcast. Happily so. Happily so. Does that mean that will be the case forever? Not so much. Not so much. That just means that I will be true to what this show's basic mission statement is: to report the news fairly, honestly, to analyze it for fact and bias, to point that out, to make commentary, yes, but that's perhaps the least important thing. Debate is not the least important thing. Fair reporting of the news and debate, that's what this show's about. And if you think that's worthy of your time and money and the time and money of your friends, pass it along. I sure would appreciate it. Thank you. There was a major digression in the last segment. I was talking about John Kerry. There are people of the Republican Party on the House Foreign Affairs Committee that are trying to figure out exactly what John Kerry is doing. He is the special presidential envoy for climate. And apparently, according to these Republicans in the House Foreign Affairs Committee, his office is, quote, effectively outsourcing, unquote, American foreign policy making to left-wing environmental groups. Now, you got to keep something in mind here. The President of the United States was talking about the virtues of the Inflation Reduction Act, which, by the way, doesn't really have a whole lot of anything to do with inflation reduction. It's a climate bill. And while he was discussing it, he talked about how special interests were being defeated by this bill and by his work. No. Special interests were not being defeated by his work. Somebody's special interests may have been defeated by his work, but not his personal special interests. Environmentalism, leftism, the unions. Those are his special interest groups. Left-wing environmental groups are in that mix. And so GOP Republicans in the House Foreign Affairs Committee are trying to figure out just exactly what kind of influence they're having on American policy. House Foreign Affairs Committee ranking member Michael McCaul of Texas led the letter with GOP members of his committee following Fox News reports that green groups were consulted and given a key role in crafting U.S. foreign policy. The reports, based on internal State Department emails, show outside non-governmental organizations acting as an apparent middleman in key global climate policy talks. That is not the way the United States handles that kind of thing. at all, ever. Ever. We have a State Department for that. I don't know what this special envoy for climate is. Moreover, I'd really like to know what he's being paid and how that's actually being covered from a budgetary standpoint. But that's another discussion for another day. I agree with the House Republicans. Quote, we need to know the extent to which Special Envoy John Kerry is farming his work out to progressive environmentalists, which could be a violation of federal law, unquote. Now, this is not the first time this happened. The CDC, during the Biden administration, made contact with teachers' unions, specifically the National Education Association, for their guidance in crafting American policy regarding COVID-19 and our children. That may have violated federal law as well. But what it showed was the CDC was not a public health organization in any way, shape, or form. It's a political action committee. And that's not what the CDC is supposed to be. I mean, what they did with the CDC is create a political luncheon group that had actual policy power, when what they should have been doing was driving the conversation. The CDC should have been telling us about mask mandates and sticking to them. When the president crossed swords with the CDC in their policy, the CDC should have said, Mr. President, you need to tone it down. You're talking politics. We're talking policy. We're talking absolute policy and truth. Because that's our job. That's what they should have done, but they didn't do it because they wanted to play politics, like the FBI, like the CIA, like the DHS, like the ONI, like the IRS, like all of those organizations. They wanted a piece of the political pie too. Those executive branch organizations are not to practice politics. They are to practice the best possible American policy to the benefit of the people of the United States in their various disciplines. And nothing more. They're not supposed to be weaponized. The FBI, the DOJ, I forgot those. They're not supposed to be weaponized against the political opposition, and yet they are. And here we have John the stupid Kerry, because John's kind of dumb. And I would say that to his face. He wouldn't care because he's that arrogant. But the simple case is he's not really smart. And so now we're in a situation here where leftists, environmentalists are not just being given a seat at the table. They're getting policy and veto policy credentials with John Kerry and the Biden administration, and that is a violation of federal law. The letter, lawmakers pointed out that the report suggests that your office is effectively outsourcing official policymaking functions of the U.S. government to progressive environmentalist groups and or utilizing them in an unlawful advisory capacity. As has been publicly reported, groups have demanded the State Department elevate climate change above all national security, greater power competition, and human rights considerations to the top of all foreign policy decisions. They have also advised the department that anyone with a history of blocking climate action must be disqualified from senior international appointments, said McCall. That's true. Reported that story here on the Wells Report. In August, Fox News also reported that Kerry's office had consulted with multiple left-wing environmental groups on multiple occasions since President Biden took office in January of 2021. Immediately upon taking office, President Biden appointed Kerry to be the nation's first presidential envoy for climate, a high-level State Department position which grants him a position on the White House National Security Council. Emails obtained by Fox News via government watchdog group Protect the Public Trust, PPT, show that staffers and advisors in Kerry's office actively sought the advice of prominent groups like the Sierra Club and the United Nations Foundation. His office also scheduled Zoom briefings with such organizations. For an administration claiming to be guided by science, there's more than a few indications that the input of their political allies may be a bigger driver of policy. That, according to PPT Director Michael Chamberlain. Little wonder the American public trust in the government is in free fall. It's true. If the American people had wanted the Sierra Club to be anywhere close to American policy, it would have elected them. But they haven't. And very likely never, ever will. Ever. Fox News also reported in September additional emails obtained by PPT showed environmental groups acting as an apparent go-between for the Biden administration and in international climate discussions. The story was cited in the House Foreign Affairs GOP letter yesterday. Quote, "The Department of State's leadership in combating the global climate crisis is supported by diplomats, negotiators, and subject matter experts with diverse backgrounds and decades of knowledge and experience from the public sector, academia, NGOs, and the private sector," according to a State Department spokesperson. Kerry's office did not respond to a request for comment on the Republican letter today. In the letter, McCall and the other GOP lawmakers continued, requesting, quote, "additional clarity regarding your office's interaction with these groups, your team's solicitation of their advice, and the department's adoption of their recommendations." They also wrote the emails reported suggest that your office has sent private updates regarding your foreign travel to a small exclusive cadre of representatives of various nonprofit organizations, NGOs, who remain better informed than the American people or the U.S. Congress regarding your whereabouts and policy agenda. The same correspondent shows your senior staff has asked these NGOs to weigh in on which candidates the United States government should support to fill important leadership positions inside the international organizations like the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. One candidate, whom an NGO representative described in the emails as horrible, went on to win a leadership seat with the OECD. This complicates both present and future diplomatic engagements now that it is publicly known that he was viewed unfavorably by American groups with privileged access to U.S. decision makers. Talk about special interests. Privileged access to U.S. decision makers? Our working relationship with the OECD and the official host of government could be jeopardized, according to the Republicans. Lawmakers said it's one thing, of course, to occasionally consult with outside groups to fill in knowledge gaps, hear a variety of perspectives, but a completely different situation to, quote, use individuals who have not gone through official vetting to form your shadow cabinet and or solicit their advice regularly when they have not been lawfully constituted as a federal advisory committee, unquote. Good point. McCall and his fellow foreign affairs Republicans warned that when the latter situation occurs, quote, individuals with considerable sway over U.S. foreign policy are not accountable to the American people. Normal transparency into government process is lost, unquote. This is important. I don't care what your politics are. Moving on, functions that are inherently governmental, like the conduct of foreign relations and the determination of foreign policy, cannot be contracted out to friends and former colleagues of your staff. Even informal arrangements that do not include financial remuneration would seem to violate the spirit, if not the letter, of this normal contracting rule. Furthermore, elevating outsiders' perspectives in the reported manner may have had the unintended consequence of discounting or making less relevant those innovative policy ideas that have been provided through official department channels, State Department. The lawmakers said it was imperative that Kerry remind all employees and officials within the department of their legal responsibility to take the appropriate measure to preserve all documents, communications, and other records, including electronic ones in line with federal law, including the Federal Records Act and related regulations, and that are related to House Foreign Affairs Committee members' series of questions. And then they go on to say, preserve all information that relates to the Office of Special Presidential Envoy for Climate communications, documents, other records created or disseminated from January 2021 to the present, exchanged with representatives of and referring or relating to the following entities and individuals, and then they list the Sierra Club among others. This is not politics. This is government oversight. We don't want the Sierra Club speaking for the United States. We just don't. They haven't been elected. They haven't been vetted. They haven't been constituted as an honest advisory committee. They're just doing business on behalf of you and me, and I don't like that. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. This is the Fishing Shirt Friday edition of the Wells Report. And before we go, I want to talk to you about something that truly disturbed me. And probably anybody who happened to see it. I'm discussing Miami Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa. He was injured in the Cincinnati game last night. He was in a situation where he was grabbed by a defensive end and spun around and, for all intents and purposes, thrown to the turf. What happened afterwards was frightening, to say the least. When you have a deep brain injury, there are involuntary muscle contractions. And a deep brain injury usually gets into the base parts of your brain stem, your medulla, so on and so forth. And when Tua Tagovailoa hit the turf, he went through one of those reactions. You can see it. It's really ugly. And that's because he was badly damaged. Now, this has happened twice within a week. He was also injured in another game over the weekend, last weekend. He was hit under similar circumstances. The back of his head hit the turf through these amazing helmets that are designed to stop concussion problems. And he was concussed. He was able to convince the doctors or what have you that he was okay, that he had a problem with his back, which caused him to stumble in that first injury. Well, okay, so you're saying it's okay to play with a spine injury? Calling a concussion, it was a concussion. I know what I'm looking at. He went to the hospital after laying on the turf for about 10 minutes. His team gathered around him, as they should have. It was a beautiful display of support. He went to the hospital. He stayed there. He was released last night, flew back with his home on the team aircraft. He sat next to Coach McDaniel, Mike McDaniel, and watched the cult comedy movie MacGruber. I think he was just happy to be with his teammates. All of the teammates were so elated. It's a scary, scary situation for all of us. He was sacked and slammed to the turf by Bengals defensive tackle Josh Tupou with 5:43 remaining in the second quarter. He stayed on the turf motionless, his fingers disjointed in what was a scary scene. Tagovailoa was then carted off the field, did not return. He was taken to the University of Cincinnati Medical Center with head and neck injuries. He did have movement in all of his extremities. McDaniel said post-game that Tagovailoa was treated for concussion, evaluated for concussion, and is in the concussion protocol. He was treated for neck and head injuries, was seen wearing a neck brace at the stadium after he was released from the hospital. Good. Last week, Tagovailoa appeared to injure his head in the second quarter and was shoved to the ground by Buffalo Bills linebacker Matt Milano. The impact of the push caused his head to slam on the turf. He struggled to his feet, and then he stumbled to the ground again. He re-entered the game after the team said he passed the NFL concussion protocol. The league and a lot of other people are trying to figure out just exactly whose protocol he passed. There's an investigation going on now. I'm not worried about any of that. I'm worried about Tua Tagovailoa. Look, it's a 1 in a million shot to play major league sports. Tua has gone through an entire life of single-minded focus to be where he is. But the one thing you can't do anything about is how you're constructed. Most head injuries are not caused by outside or external force. Most head injuries are caused because your brain sloshes around inside your skull. The actual injury is not necessarily caused by being bonked on the head. Most brain injuries are caused by your brain smacking the inside of your skull. There are varying pieces of distance between your brain and your skull. Brains are of varying consistencies. They are fragile things. Like it or not, Tua Tagovailoa has experienced brain damage. That's what concussions are. I don't want to see an involuntary end to a brilliant career. But I don't want to see Tua Tagovailoa die on the field to hear teammates, wives, league officials say, well, at least he died doing something he loved. Roger Staubach had a similar problem. He was thrown to the turf and went through similar things. He retired. I believe that Tua needs to as well. And I'm making that statement on the 30th day of September, year of our Lord 2022. Of all the things that I say on this broadcast, this is the one I hope I never have to say. I told you so. This has been the Wells Report, made possible because of you and the fact that you watch it and you support it. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I appreciate it greatly. Stick around. We'll be back next week for another week of the Wells Report. Until then, God bless you. All right. Whoa. Man, have you noticed that this is a hard job? All right, beloveds. Thank you so much for everything that you've given me. Thank you so much for the gift of your eyes and your ears. Okay? You have yourself a wonderful, wonderful weekend, and I will see you on Monday